And we are seeing ICE presence here in Northeast Florida this week.
Right. Agents were spotted running joint operations with FHP throughout our area.
Florida, they're trying to get their hands on your money.
Yeah, so the FBI is warning, don't fall for it. As News4Jax reporter Aaron Farrar tells us, these scammers are using threats.
When the forklifts finally started moving again, the concrete in Bay 6 was glittering blue. Millions of pressed pills had burst from split vacuum bricks during the raid, scattering across the loading lane like industrial confetti. By sunrise, evidence markers covered the floor of the CrossMesa Freight terminal in Ontario, California. Broken pallet wrap clung to a steel rack. A half-finished shift log still sat beside a cooling cup of gas station coffee. Outside, commuter traffic had already begun moving east on Interstate 10, passing a warehouse that only hours earlier had looked like any other Inland Empire distribution point. At 3:57 a.m., that illusion ended. FBI agents, DEA task force officers, and California Highway Patrol commercial investigators breached through a side personnel door after a judge signed off on a sealed federal warrant package. The first rooms looked ordinary: shrink-wrap stations, barcode printers, refrigerated lanes. Then an evidence team opened a false caging wall behind a stack of motor oil cartons and found the real facility. There were currency counters, root boards, burner phones charging in milk crates, 12 laminated maps covering California, Nevada, Arizona, and outbound lanes deeper into the Midwest. A whiteboard carried truck numbers beside coded initials and 3 words that changed the case: green light from scale. That phrase did not belong in a drug warehouse. It belonged to a compromised infrastructure system. The first inventory count tied the terminal to 8.4 million illegal pills, 9 storage warehouses, 21 distribution hubs, and a trafficking architecture worth an estimated $310 million in intercepted product value. But the most dangerous discovery was not the narcotics. It was the paperwork, inspection windows, weigh station notes, facility audit schedules, names of logistics brokers, warehouse managers, and public employees who should never have been in the same room on the same ledger. This was no ordinary pill mill using trucks for cover. It was a freight network compromise running through the arteries of the American Southwest. The investigation began 7 months earlier with a truck stop that should have produced nothing more than a delayed delivery. On November 18th, 2025, an Arizona Department of Public Safety trooper working commercial enforcement outside Kingman pulled a white refrigerated tractor trailer after its electronic logging device showed a route gap that did not match fuel receipts. The cargo manifest listed boxed nutritional supplements headed to a warehouse in North Las Vegas. The packaging looked professional. The seal numbers looked correct. But the trailer temperature was off by 9 degrees, and one shrink-wrapped pallet carried labels from 2 different distributors, layered one over the other. Troopers opened the rear lane and found the first crack in the system. Behind the listed product sat 4 pallets of blue oxycodone counterfeit tablets pressed with pharmaceutical markings, wrapped inside legitimate freight and buffered by commercial insulation. The load totaled 412,000 pills. And the driver, Eric Madsen, insisted he was hauling a sealed relay shipment and had never met the shipper. His phone told a different story. It contained recurring contacts with dispatchers in Ontario, a truck yard in Henderson, a produce broker in Phoenix, and a compliance consultant in San Bernardino, who had no visible reason to be in the chain. That should have made the case a regional narcotics bust. It did not. 3 weeks later, Treasury analysts noticed that one of the companies tied to Madsen's route had received loss mitigation reimbursements from a bonded warehouse insurer after claiming spoilage on freight that never appeared in any recorded damage inventory. At the same time, a Nevada Highway Patrol commercial inspector quietly referred a suspicious pattern of pre-cleared weigh station passes involving the same cluster of carriers. Different agencies, different anomalies, same freight spine. The DEA opened a corridor review. FBI Los Angeles joined when subpoenaed banking records linked the trucking firms to Shell payroll services, equipment leasing fronts, and real estate purchases around Ontario, North Las Vegas, and Goodyear, Arizona. What started as a mislabeled trailer on Interstate 40 began to resemble something more disciplined. Remember that first truck. It was not the source of the network. It was the one load that slipped out of a logistics machine built to hide narcotics in the same flow that moved groceries, auto parts, and consumer goods across 3 states. By January, investigators had stopped treating the case like a sequence of isolated drug loads. It was now a map. The map began in Southern California, Ontario, Fontana, Bloomington, Mira Loma. Those cities formed the Western Intake Core, where inbound containers, cross-dock trailers, and short-haul relays could be blended into the Inland Empire's constant freight motion. From there, the network pushed north and east through warehouse clusters in North Las Vegas, Henderson, Goodyear, Tolleson, Kingman, Barstow, and San Bernardino County before breaking into 12 interstate transport routes extending into Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, and beyond. But the 3-state spine was where the system lived. Investigators identified 21 distribution hubs functioning at different levels. Some were major cross-docking yards. Some were short-stay truck lots. Some were clean warehouses used only to restack freight and swap paperwork. 9 storage warehouses became primary federal targets after surveillance showed repeated late-night trailer rotation, unlisted forklift activity, and camera blind spots inconsistent with lawful logistics practice. The corporate skin around the enterprise was thick. Desert Crown Carriers, Mesa Point Storage, Cal Vista Produce Relay, Silver Range Equipment Leasing, Arroyo Freight Solutions, Sun Peak Nutritional Wholesale. 9 of the companies were active enough to look legitimate. Several paid payroll taxes. Some held warehouse insurance. Others leased forklifts, scanners, and refrigerated units like ordinary distributors. But Treasury and RSCI followed the money and found the same small circle of bookkeepers, nominee managers, and transfer points behind all of them. Then the corruption layer surfaced. A commercial way station supervisor in Nevada had flagged certain carrier numbers as routine, low-risk traffic outside normal review. A county warehouse fire inspector in San Bernardino signed clean audits on buildings later found to contain false caging walls and hidden pill presses. A private freight compliance consultant in Phoenix sold inspection schedules and software credentials that allowed dispatchers to mimic clean transport histories. One logistics park security manager was providing gate camera downtime in exchange for monthly cash drops. That changed the case. The syndicate was no longer just hiding drugs inside freight. It was purchasing predictability from the systems meant to scrutinize freight. And that is how a regional pill operation became a protected corridor worth hundreds of millions. And still, the investigators had not reached the central question. Who was coordinating the timing between the clean loads and the dirty ones? And how deep did that coordination run inside the warehousing network? The mechanism was industrial. A clean shipment would enter a yard carrying lawful consumer goods, energy drinks, auto filters, boxed supplements, produce cartons. Before the trailer left for the next leg, workers inside a trusted hub would open one inner lane, insert narcotics bricks behind listed product, reseal the pallets, and update the barcode record to match an already scheduled relay stop. By the time the truck crossed into Nevada or Arizona, the paperwork, seal numbers, and route history all appeared to belong to a normal commercial shipment. What looked like commerce was actually concealment. The network relied on freight practices most people never notice. Cross-docking, load balancing, relay driving, emergency route substitution, mixed pallet consolidation. Those are normal tools inside the logistics industry. The syndicate turned them into camouflage. If one trailer drew scrutiny, the load could be split across 2 others. If a hub ran hot, the pallet could be held under temperature exception review and moved during the next shift. If law enforcement focused on major highways, the drivers shifted onto secondary commercial corridors and re-entered the interstate closer to destination. The pills themselves moved in categories. The blue oxycodone counterfeits were routed through high-volume consumer freight where package density hid weight anomalies. Methamphetamine tablets pressed to resemble ADHD medication moved in supplement cases. Cash came back west in equipment return cartons, replacement part crates, and unremarkable office supply pallets. The organization did not treat narcotics like contraband. It treated them like freight classes. The labor model mattered too. Short-haul drivers often knew nothing. Mid-level dispatchers knew just enough. Yard supervisors controlled the dangerous handoffs. A trusted cell handled repackaging. A separate finance layer settled fuel cards, repair invoices, and spoilage reimbursements that washed trafficking proceeds through normal-looking business losses. This is where the case became something more than a drug story. A freight network compromise works because it does not ask the whole system to go dirty. It asks for small permissions, one false audit, one skipped trailer inspection, one relabeled pallet, one driver told not to ask why his manifest changed after midnight. Enough small permissions repeated across enough warehouses become a protected supply corridor. That was the real machine federal agents were trying to break. At the center of the network sat Gabriel Serrano, 48, a former regional freight broker who understood the Inland Empire better than some legitimate logistics executives. Publicly, he operated as an equipment and carrier consultant. Privately, prosecutors would later describe him as the route architect, who turned warehousing density into narcotics cover. His operational lieutenant was Nicole Vance, 41, and head of Desert Crown Carriers. Vance did not run street crews. She ran dispatch, trailer swaps, driver assignments, and route substitution. In intercepted calls, she sounded less like a trafficker than a stressed distribution manager trying to keep a chain on schedule. Marco Salas, 36, controlled the warehouse side. He supervised nighttime restacking teams in Ontario, Barstow, and North Las Vegas, and decided which hubs could absorb pressure when law enforcement attention spiked. Workers later told agents Salas never yelled. He simply made clear which trailers were not to be touched by curious hands. Then there was Thomas Kearney, 57, a freight compliance consultant based in Phoenix. Kearney was the bridge between criminal logistics and formal oversight. He sold inspection timing, coached carriers on how to survive spot reviews, and kept certain warehouse records clean enough to withstand a superficial audit. Around them moved drivers, mechanics, forklift operators, payroll clerks, and one compromised weigh station official. But this was the spine: route design, dispatch control, warehouse control, compliance manipulation. That combination made the network durable. Operation Iron Mile began at 4:12 a.m. on June 4, 2026, after a 6-week surge of sealed warrants, pole camera surveillance, live trailer tracking, financial restraint planning, and undercover confirmation inside 2 logistics parks. The strike package covered California, Nevada, and Arizona simultaneously. FBI Los Angeles coordinated the command structure. DEA led narcotics interdiction. IRSCI handled freeze actions. And state commercial enforcement units in all 3 states were folded in on a need-to-know basis only hours before execution to prevent route leaks. The first targets were the records and the routes. At 4:18, digital teams entered Desert Crown Carriers' dispatch suite in Ontario and cloned its load boards before remote deletion commands could hit. At 4:21, Treasury and IRSCI froze accounts tied to payroll shells, warehouse leases, fuel card pools, and equipment lenders connected to the syndicate. At 4:24, undercover trackers confirmed movement at 3 target yards: Ontario, North Las Vegas, and Goodyear. That meant live loads were still in motion. Then the breach teams moved. Ontario at 4:27, Fontana at 4:31, North Las Vegas at 4:34, Henderson at 4:39, Goodyear at 4:42, Tolleson at 4:45, San Bernardino County at 4:48, Barstow at 4:53. So by the end of the first half hour, federal agents and state partners had entered 9 storage warehouses and multiple relay lots. Some sites yielded stacked pill bricks immediately. Others yielded barcode printers, pallet film, chemical dust, false walls, and route boards marked with outbound windows to Utah, Colorado, and Texas. The first wave was already substantial: pills, cash, manifests, drivers in custody. But that was only the middle of the operation. At 5:07, analysts exploiting Nicole Vance's phone discovered an emergency reroute thread labeled Summer Spill. It instructed 2 live shipments to bypass primary hubs and move through secondary lots near Boulder City and Needles if any California site went dark. That changed everything. Highway interdiction teams were redirected in real time. Air support picked up one tractor trailer leaving a Henderson yard under a false produce manifest. Another was tracked on Interstate 40 eastbound. Both were stopped before sunrise. One carried 1.1 million counterfeit pills hidden behind bottled tea concentrate. The other contained cash, packaging dyes, and secure notebooks cross-referencing trailer numbers to warehouse gate camera outages. Those seizures pushed the operation from major success into structural collapse. By midday, 46 arrests had been executed, including Gabriel Serrano, Nicole Vance, Marco Salas, and Thomas Kearney. 21 distribution hubs had been dismantled or placed under federal control. 12 interstate transport routes were shut down. More than 8.4 million illegal pills had been seized across the life of the investigation and the coordinated raids. Asset forfeiture teams moved against $58 million in frozen cash, accounts, vehicles, real estate interests, and business holdings. The public would see a drug raid. The case agents saw something else. A freight system had been cut open, and inside it was an entire narcotics enterprise using the language of distribution as cover. The evidence assessment took weeks because the network had documented itself like a business. Agents seized 63 burner phones, 18 loadboard terminals, 11 barcode printer sets, 26 ledgers, and hundreds of manifests showing how clean freight and contaminated freight moved in parallel. They recovered pallet diagrams, fuel card allocations, warehouse shift rosters, and compliance notes explaining which hubs required extra caution because of local inspection culture. The numerical picture hardened fast. 8.4 million illegal pills seized, 46 arrests, 21 distribution hubs dismantled, 9 storage warehouses raided, 12 interstate transport routes shut down, $310 million in intercepted drug value, $58 million frozen in assets, accounts, and property holdings. Those numbers told prosecutors the scale. The paperwork told them the design. Perhaps most damaging were the crossover records. A clean produce manifest matched to a dirty relay lot. A warehouse fire inspection signed off days before false walls were discovered. A low-risk commercial code entered against a carrier later tied to 2 live narcotics loads. Each record on its own looked survivable. Together, they proved that the network had not merely used freight infrastructure, and it had learned how to shape freight behavior around its own needs. In Phoenix, 17-year-old Mason Herrera died after taking what he believed was a legitimate pain pill purchased through a school contact. In Riverside County, Elena Torres spent months wondering why her brother Luis, a short-haul driver with no criminal history, was suddenly terrified of answering basic questions about his route logs. Federal agents later told the family he had likely been used as an unwitting relay driver on compromised loads before disappearing from the payroll. That is the human cost these operations hide behind spreadsheets and pallets. Counterfeit pill corridors do not remain inside warehouses. They spill into neighborhoods, schools, work crews, and families that never see the freight yards where the system begins. Honest drivers lose work. Then small carriers lose contracts to shell companies willing to underbid because narcotics revenue fills the gap. Communities inherit overdose deaths, while the people who built the corridor talk in terms of mileage, spoilage, and rate sheets. The pills moved like freight. The damage did not. By the end of summer 2026, federal prosecutors had filed conspiracy, narcotics trafficking, money laundering, wire fraud, asset forfeiture, and corruption-related charges against the principal defendants and multiple facilitators tied to warehousing, compliance, and carrier operations. State agencies opened parallel reviews into commercial inspection protocols, warehouse audit handling, and the private compliance industry that had helped the network stay invisible. Several warehouses lost operating licenses. Multiple shell companies were dissolved under court order. Publicly, officials described the operation as one of the most significant freight-based pill interdictions in the Southwest. That was true. It was also incomplete, because this case was not simply about pills hidden in trucks. It was about how a criminal enterprise can rent the discipline of legitimate logistics, timetables, route density, warehouse overflow, commercial trust, paperwork fatigue, the assumption that if a trailer looks professional enough, it must belong in the system. Gabriel Serrano's network understood that freight moves on confidence. If enough people assume the pallet is normal, the pallet keeps moving. The takedown damaged the organization hard. 46 arrests tore out the management layer. 21 hubs were neutralized. 12 routes were shut down. The $58 million was frozen before it could be relayered deeper into shell property and carrier assets. But even in the aftermath, agents found continuity notes on seized devices. Alternate yard locations in New Mexico, backup lease discussions in Central Nevada, and a short list of replacement companies prepared in case Iron Mile ever hit the core. That is the final warning. A freight network compromise does not need one giant conspiracy meeting in a dark room. It survives through repetition. A scanner that looks the other way. A supervisor who signs the audit. A dispatcher who adjusts the route, a consultant who sells the inspection calendar, a driver who decides not to ask why his trailer weight changed after midnight. None of those moments look historic on their own. Together, they become a trafficking corridor stretching across states. The public remembers the raid footage, the pills on warehouse floors, the stacks of cash, the mug shots. But the deeper lesson sits in the logistics model itself. If criminals can embed narcotics at scale inside ordinary distribution lanes across California, Nevada, and Arizona, then the threat is not just the next cartel shipment. It is the next time infrastructure is trusted more than it is examined.